DJ Rogers here with Jake Van Lunen. It's round 15 at Grand Prix Los Angeles, and these players are fighting for their shot in the top 8. Corey Baumeister with Esper Control up against Matthew Nikolai on blue-black mid-range. One of these really they both have this very base blue-black cards, but on the left side of the battlefield, a Splash 4 Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Such a powerful card.
Absolutely. So both these decks really, pushing really hard to survive against the more aggressive creature-based decks in the format. You'll see cards like Ravenous Chupacabra, lots of inexpensive spot removal. Here they are playing against each other, and in a matchup like this, those cards are not going to be very exciting. So a lot of this game one is going to come down to who draws more powerful action cards. Matthew Nikolai, he has good targets for those removal spells, but still, this game is going to be won through a card advantage war.
And we see our first spell of the game here at the end of Matthew Nikolai's fourth turn. It is a Glimmer of Genius from Baumeister. He's going to take a look at the top two cards, scrying 2. Once he decides where he wants those ones, it's going to be draw 2, getting 2 energy as well. Now he's already up a card, but these players so far playing very patiently, just a land for the turn, kicking it back to the opponent.
Yeah, and I think right now, one of the schools of thought on a control mirror is that the first person who goes for it, if you will, ends up being the person who loses. Now they're at the stage of the game where if either of them tap out, they could find themselves getting their spell countered and then getting haymakered on the swing back by something like Teferi from Corey or the Scarab God from Matthew Nikolai. So people need to be very patient here, and both players really want to be hitting their land drops consistently, because once they stop hitting their land drops, they're going to get to a point where they might have to discard down to hand size, and that means they might be further incentivized to be the first one to try to strike.
Yeah, and part of that is because these decks very comfortable playing on their opponent's turn. A lot of instance in this build. Now, Matthew Nikolai's does have more that require the main phase in the form of some of those Planeswalkers, Liliana Death's Majesty, the Ravenous Chupacabras, those Glintsleeve Siphoners, but so far seems very content to play this draw a card, play a land, and pass it back game.
Yeah, so Corey there, missing a 7th land drop, and it may seem odd. Oh, he has 6 lands in play. He's fine. His mana's good. But every single one of these land drops is very important. That meant that Corey just had to drop an Essence Scatter into his graveyard to discard to hand size, and that Essence Scatter has a lot of value in a matchup like this where Matthew Nikolai is playing cards like the Scarab God.
Yeah, and we've seen that card really make itself known on the battlefield in a couple of rounds previously. That one can just come down, change the entire fabric of the game. We've seen games that should have been lost, all things considered, and with that singular draw came back into it. So now we're going to see a cycle of Forsake the Worldly, discard it, draw a card, and we're going to have to discard to hand size again. Only 4 mana remaining. Corey Baumeister really starting to miss those land drops, and Nikolai so far very content, throwing down the 8th mana of the game and just passing it right back. We do finally get another land here from Corey Baumeister. And these players, this is the kind of thing to where looking at the battlefield, it doesn't look like much is happening. It's very much kind of the iceberg here. We see the 10%, which is these lands, but underneath the surface, these players have really got a lot of considerations to make about when they need to make an action.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the things that a lot of people who are watching might be confused by is the fact that nothing has happened. Here we are, it's turn 9 now, I believe, and this
8.
is the first action being taken.
So we've got Champion of Wits. That's going to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. It's a Fatal Push and a Ravenous Chupacabra. That card is going to have to go hungry. No dinner for it here on the battlefield tonight. It's a 2-1. It's the first bit of pressure, and it's going to be backed up by a Glintsleeve Siphoner. Matthew Nikolai is going to go ahead and just make a little bit of a surge here, but still 4 mana left untapped. And looks like Baumeister is going to have to respond to this.
Yeah, Corey deciding how he's going to answer these 2 cards. The one good part about this, for Corey at least, is that he now has cards to cast his spells on. He's been discarding to hand size. That's a pretty big disadvantage here. He's behind on mana. The fact that he can actually start casting spells means that at least on the following turn, he won't be discarding to hand size. He'll be able to keep those spells and or lands and use them eventually.
And we've got Essence Scatter taking down that Glintstream Siphoner. It is just the Champion of Wits that will remain. Corey Baumeister does get to expend a card, so even if he doesn't draw a land this turn, like you said, he's not going to have to discard because at least his cards have got a home somewhere on the battlefield.
Yeah, now the Champion of Wits that Matthew Nikolai had there, that's an important card in this matchup because of how many very weak cards Matthew Nikolai has in matchups like this. Cards like Ravenous Chupacabra and Fatal Push, which he can then just cycle through and replace.
Search for Azcanta hitting the battlefield. This is one of those big cards that you talked about, and you can see Nikolai, once that hit the battlefield, he took a look at that hand to see if he could answer it, and 2 copies of Essence Scatter are not going to get it done. He's got removal, he's got answers for creatures in his hand, and against this Esper control deck, that's not going to do as much as you'd like. He's really just going to be controlling Torrential Gearhulks with those.
Yeah, and that's a big part of this matchup also is the fact that Corey Baumeister has versatile counter magic like Disallow, like Negate, where Matthew Nikolai, at least in the main deck, really only has access to things like Essence Scatter and then a single copy of Censor and a single copy of Commit to Memory.
And look at the patience here from Nikolai. He's got that Liliana Death's Majesty in hand, and he has got an abundance of mana, but he's not willing to deploy it yet.
No, and again, we've talked at length about the first person who sneezes is usually the person who ends up getting punished by a Haymaker, and Matthew Nikolai really doesn't want to be the person who's spending 5 mana first and then having Corey untap, resolving a Teferi of Hero of Dominaria when he's under no pressure.
So this is going to the graveyard, and that's going to mean that it is card number 7. There is a Field of Ruin on the battlefield, however, so Corey Baumeister made this transformation of this Search for Azcanta into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. But that Field of Ruin is face up on the table. He's aware of the situation that he may only get 1 activation out of it, and that's what he's valuing right now.
Yeah, Corey, very happy to flip this, is going to activate it, get a card,
Oh, it's going to be Disallow, counter target activated ability. Now it's going to be a fight, and it's just going to be a Cycle Land looking for some way to stop this, and that Field of Ruin is going to be off the battlefield. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Corey Baumeister had a plan all along.
Yeah, and with this Azcanta the Sunken Ruin on the battlefield, it seems like Corey, if he's able to protect it, should be able to grind card advantage all the way to victory. I know it's so early to say. I know both players still have a ton of cards in their hand, but things look really good for Corey. That 1 land is just such a powerhouse here. It's going to provide him with a stream of cards that are curated and selected off of the top of the library, and his counter magic is just so versatile. As long as Corey's able to hit a reasonable number of land drops, he's got to love his position in this game.
Yeah, and of course the conversation is always about questions and answers in this game, and Azcanta in a lot of ways doesn't look like one, but that is a big question, and it is on Matthew Nikolai here to find an answer in a way to keep pace with that kind of card advantage, or some way to actually just put a stop to it. It's going to be another copy of Champion of Wits entering the battlefield. Looks like a couple of lands are going to be going to the graveyard, trying to get more relevant draws. And now is the time to move into attack position. Liliana, Death's Majesty on the stack. And we'll see if Corey Baumeister has got an answer to it. He does have access to this Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. We might see him go for an activation of that one, looking for one of his main deck ways to really stop that. He does have a copy of Negate in the main deck that he could deploy on this.
Yeah, so I'm actually, oh, okay.
Ooh, never mind. It's Syncopate, where you have got to cast or pay an additional 3. That is going to put Liliana into exile, and it's a pass back here. We see only a little bit of mana available for Nikolai. This is going to be Baumeister's chance to deploy a Haymaker.
Exactly, and Baumeister under a bit of pressure here from the 2 Champion of Wits, and those bodies do matter. However, that's only 4 points of power. Teferi, when it gets plussed here, it goes up to 5. But Corey, apparently just passing the turn back here, does not have the correct answer.
No, hey, it got eaten by all the Vine Mares. He's just got to kick it back. 4 damage coming back in. Baumeister finds himself down to 10, and it's another copy of Champion of Wits. Boy, I bet Corey Baumeister is wishing that Maelstrom Pulse made its way into Core Set 2019.
And all those going to the graveyard. A little dangerous.
So it's going to be another situation of draw 2, discard 2. One of the cards is going to be Fatal Push. Still taking a look at what this other option is going to be. And remember that we do still have, there's quite a few cards in hand, but currently we have not seen any of those Essence Scatters go to the graveyard yet. We see Vraska's Contempt going away. So this is a Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, but functionally, this is the last threat in Nikolai's hand. The other 2 cards that remain will be countering creature spells. So if Corey Baumeister can find himself an answer, he'll be able to dig back into it. But he is at 10, facing down 9 damage on this board. He's certainly under threat.
And Corey there with a pair of Vraska's Contempts in hand. He has the tools he needs really to stay alive for quite some time. He also has this as Cant of the Sunken Ruin. He's been incredibly patient, but now may be the time in which he needs to start deploying these cards just to keep himself alive here. He's at 10. There's 6 points of power on the other side of the table.
And we do see that Glint-Sleeve Siphoner go to the graveyard. The Disallow from Corey Baumeister is going to counter it. And now we're going to see Glimmer of Genius. I thought for a second that we were going to see the Vraska's Contempt, but no, Baumeister, his priority is more cards in hand. Please and thank you. We're going to go ahead and, I think, put a land up top, see what else we can draw, and just keep the good times rolling as he heads into his next turn. Drawing a card.
Yeah, Corey just ignoring these champions to the point of it's scary to watch, right? Like it's heart-wrenching.
It's like when you got
he's down to 10. You're like, oh my goodness, Corey, what are you doing to me?
It's like when you're kind of hanging out at the bottom of a hill and you can see like this small boulder. It's the snowball, right? And it's just rolling down. You're thinking, oh no, I got time.
Yeah,
I got time.
Plenty of time. We're doing this.
Oh no, that's how an avalanche gets started. So, Vraska's Contempt pointing at one of these Champion of Wits. That's going to eliminate it. Also gaining 2 life. So this is actually, at least for the turn, going to negate 2 of these swings.
Yeah, so Corey back up to 8.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that's the Scarab God.
The Scarab God hitting the battlefield, the 5/5. That is going to be able to reanimate. We already know that there's some good cards in that graveyard. Glint-Sleeve Siphoner hanging out. Has Corey got an answer? It looks like he does. Both a copy of Negate as well as Disallow in hand. And that's going to eliminate it. You know, Nikolai, he's got 2 cards in hand. We keep seeing Baumeister maybe considers plays about, you know, am I ready to get into a fight with whatever this is? But until he's ready to go with Torrential Gearhulks, those 2 cards are going to be duds. Just Baumeister isn't aware of it yet.
Yeah, Baumeister doesn't know about the double Essence Scatter, but considering how long those cards have sat in Matthew Nikolai's hand, I imagine he's very good at figuring things out, and he'll likely understand that they can't really be much besides Essence Scatter at this point.
There's Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, coming down to the battlefield. This is going to be kicking things off right. The card advantage, we haven't even seen Azcanta the Sunken Ruin really do much yet.
Yeah.
But now you combine that with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and the cards are just going to keep on coming for Corey. He's got to be happy about this turn. He's going to untap a couple of lands and kick it back. Even the pressure that's on board right now, unable to eliminate a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria if Corey does nothing.
Yeah, Corey positioned himself really well. Waited until the very last minute to start deploying his defenses, and instead used all that time to build up additional cards in hand, and it's really worked out beautifully for him here.
And it looks like Nikolai is pointing at the face. I saw him point forward when he turned these creatures sideways. I think he is of the mentality of, I'm not going to kill that Teferi, I'm going to kill you.
And I can't fault him for it. I don't think I'd want to play a long-term game against an opponent who had more cards than me in hand and a Teferi on the battlefield. I want to end this one quick, and I'm going to do it by attacking you with these 2 copies of Champion of Wits.
Yep, one thing to consider is that Baumeister does have some removal spells in hand. He's even got Cast Down, not deploying them yet, and it's going to be Argyl's Bloodfast. But he has been incredibly patient about just getting punched by Champion of Wits. It's a very shocking thing to be patient about. Negate firing off at this Argyl's Bloodfast. That's going to find its way. We keep seeing Nikolai drawing these phenomenal cards in this matchup, and except for these 2 lone Champion of Wits that have really been doing their work, every other card has been very cleanly answered.
Yeah, Corey really working through this game like a stone-cold master. Keeping everybody on the edge of the seat down to 4. Countless opportunities to pad that life total. Instead, choosing to pad the number of cards he has in hand.
And looks like we are going to be going for this during the main phase. I think at this point he has realized that he can cast these spells with no consequence whatsoever, making sure that it happens before Nikolai is able to draw a card that could potentially disrupt him from doing so. Champion of Wits is going to go ahead and swing in. It's an island that hits the battlefield for Nikolai, which means that we have got the inside scoop on what remains in hand. And Baumeister looks like has he got another one of these Glimmer of Genius? He's been really enjoying that card.
I believe he does. So that would be the third one he's cast this game. He can also just activate Azcanta.
And it looks like that's going to be the case. Taking a look at the top four, you can put Vraska's Contempt in your hand. That's going to be a pretty happy way to go about things. So now we've got this removal spell. Might even have the opportunity to fire it off. Yep, at the end step, you already saw the island come down. Nikolai sees the writing on the wall, and it's time to pick it up. Game 2 incoming. Baumeister, he's got to be happy. This is a match, and actually all these future matches have got an enormous weight on him. Already, these players are competing for the top 8. But for Corey, if he makes the top 8, he needs to make the finals of this event to lock up platinum. Semifinals will not do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is about as high pressure of a situation as you could get to. And Corey, over the last few years, he has been one of the very best standard players in the entire world. Here he is in a standard tournament, back against the wall, needs to make it to the finals of a tournament with 1,000 people.
Well, here he was.
Yeah.
So we're going to be heading into the sideboard here for Nikolai. What are we going to be taking a look at? You know, you've already discussed a little bit of these sideboard considerations into this matchup. Do you really think that he's going to be pretty happy heading into the sideboarded games?
So Matthew Nikolai is going to be happy to bring in counter magic that can interact more favorably. In the first game, he had the commit to memory, he had the sensor, but besides that, his counter magic and his removal was really aiming to beat creatures. Corey, even though he had a lot less in the way of reasonable threats, and he didn't have access to those really powerful cards like Argyl's Bloodfast or Glint Sleeve Siphoner, the fact that his counter magic was more versatile, the fact that he was so patient in dealing with those Champion of Wits, and he made sure that the way he dealt with them was via Vraska's Contempt to exile them, and he never had to deal with them being eternalized. Corey played that game beautifully and found a way to make that game one favorable for him. Moving into sideboarded games, Matthew Nikolai is going to have access to Duress. He's going to have Doomfall. He's going to have Jace's Defeat. He's going to have Negate. He's going to add extra search for Azcanta. He's going to have Sorcerer's Spyglass to deal with Teferi. He's going to have Spell Pierce. This matchup changes drastically. Looking at Corey's side of things, Corey post-board, he gets access to Chromium the Mutable. He gets a Duress. He's going to bring in Glint Sleeve Siphoners of his own. He's going to have Jace's Defeat. He's going to get extra negates. I mean, both of these players in Game 1 had piles of dead cards. You know, just like their deck was essentially a whole bunch of cards that are good and a whole bunch of cards that are absolutely miserable, right? Now they're moving into games 2 and 3, and both their decks become lean, mean fighting machines for a control mirror. And that means that games 2 and 3 are going to be just slugfest. As long as both players are able to hit their land drops for a reasonable amount of time, we're going to get to watch a game that is won by the better player with an unbelievable level of consistency, and that's really exciting for anybody watching at home.
Yeah, and even the cards themselves are going to be lining up, so it is going to be about the manipulation of the cards on the battlefield in hand, because this is going to be a lot of one-for-one comparisons in a very literal sense when it comes to the way that these cards are deployed. They're both going to have the ability to use their Search for Azcanta, so who uses it better? They're both going to have the ability to use, you know, a card like, or he doesn't have Argyl's Bloodfest on the sideboard, but Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Right?
Yeah,
so who uses it better?
Like, they have different card advantage engines, but those are going to be their most important cards in this matchup. Matthew Nikolai, you know, he has Argyl's Bloodfast. He has his Glint Sleeve Siphoners. He has his Planeswalkers. He gets to add Search. Whereas Corey, you know, for his card advantage engines, he has Teferi and Glimmer. can't lie, I like Corey's card advantage engines better. Teferi is an exceptionally powerful card. Glimmer of Genius, the fact that Corey can be casting that at instant speed, that he can leave mana open and decide whether or not he wants to be doing something to control Matthew Nikolai's game plan, or whether or not he wants to be pulling ahead on cards to ensure he hits land drops or what have you. I think that Corey's card draw spells are better. But Matthew Nikolai's Disruption is better. So we have this really interesting push and pull going on. I think it's going to be anybody's game here.
Yeah, I mean, that Teferi looks really good, but looks a lot less good if you're looking at him through a spyglass.
That's absolutely true. And, when we first found out we were watching a matchup like this, one of the things we said was that the person who has a slightly slower strategy is usually favored in a match of Magic. If you're too slow, you can get run over by the super fast strategy. But if you're one step behind your opponent, if they're playing a pile of 2/2s for 2 and you're playing a pile of 3/3s for 3, you're going to win.
Yep.
If they're playing a pile of 3/3s for 3 and you're playing a pile of 4/4s for 4, you're going to win. Just in that sense, Corey is slightly bigger here. And he's got 2 games, and he's only got to win one of them. He's got to love his chances here. Matthew Nikolai, I've watched him play a lot over the last year or so. Even in between matches when I've been walking around, I've stumbled upon games of his where he was in like these really, really tight squeakers. And I've watched him play beautiful matches where he's outmaneuvered people and done pretty incredible things. So it's going to be a lot harder to do that against somebody like Corey, but Matthew is definitely somebody who's going to be capable of winning this match. Something
to note here, you talked earlier in round 13 about how these players are really going to be trying to maintain their composure, keep it emotional. I'm relatively familiar with Corey, and he is a ball of energy on a given day, and the level of just, his hands are steady. He's moving into this matchup very deliberately, and this is a very critical. Every one of these matches carries so much weight. The amount of players that achieve platinum level is small, and he has got that potentially right in his hands. These are big matchups for him.
Yeah, both of these players very capable of playing under pressure. When I told the story earlier about the best advice I ever received about playing high-pressure matches of Magic, the person who gave me that advice was Corey's older brother.
Brad Nelson.
Yeah. Corey comes from good Magic stock, especially good standard Magic stock. He and his older brother are, they make each other better. And I think when you're playing Magic for fun and trying to get better at Magic, and the person who you're playing against at your house, at night when there are no guests over happens to be, this is now 8 years ago, like the reigning player of the year, that's going to make you somebody who's not really shaken when you're on camera playing for top 8 at a GP.
Yeah. He's at a level to where the person that he just play tests against is someone who is an absolute titan in Magic. So these players are kicking things off, and we'll be heading right down to the field. It is game 2. So it is a Glint Sleeve Siphoner for Nikolai to kick things off. This is one of those great card advantage engines that's also going to be applying pressure to Corey.
Oh, now, so this is an aggressive use of energy here for Matthew Nikolai. Matthew Nikolai, 2 Ether Hubs, has a Glint Sleeve Siphoner to provide him with additional energy so that he can create colored mana, is able to untap with that Glint Sleeve Siphoner and get an extra card, but now he finds himself in the precarious situation of really needing colored mana.
If Corey had a Fatal Push at that stage, this game would have been a slam dunk. He would have been completely out of energy, and those Ether Hubs would have tapped for nothing, and right now he's only got that 1 energy in reserve. So no capability to go for any double blue spells, any double black spells. He's got his work cut out for him in this mana base. That was a very aggressive attempt for some card advantage. It paid off.
Oh, it definitely paid off. And Matthew Nikolai recognizes what's important in this match. And what's important in this match is drawing more cards than your opponent. He had the Glint Sleeve Siphoner in his opening hand. He decided, all right, let's deploy this, obviously. And Corey didn't have a cast down, didn't have a Fatal Push and is now getting punished by Glint Sleeve Siphoner and its ability to just take over a game by itself.
Yeah, we've got a Field of Ruin joining the battlefield, but already back up to 2 energy for Nikolai. Has the opportunity to once again refill this hand, and it looks like at the end step, we're going to go ahead and sacrifice this Field of Ruin. This is likely going to grab a basic swamp, maybe a basic island. I think there's a Drowned Catacombs in hand for that consideration. And this is really just a method to continually correct this mana base at this point.
And notice Matthew Nikolai chooses to target the Glacial Fortress here with the Field of Ruin. The reason he's choosing to target Glacial Fortress is because if he had chosen to target either of the other 2 non-basic lands, Corey could, if he wanted to, tap that land and potentially cast a Fatal Push and then search his library for an untapped land and still get to cast something like a Glimmer of Genius on Matthew's end step.
Interesting. Man, that is... You've got the read on this. This is some high-level play. So, it is the Field of Ruin happening here, and it looks like Baumeister is making some considerations for what he wants to do. It's going to be a Vraska's Contempt in response. And this is prior to the fact, part of this is that now Matthew Nikolai has only 1 mana available, so something like a negate would not be an option. It's going to be the basic swamp coming down for Nikolai. It's a basic island for Baumeister. It looks like these two, you know, they might have some disagreements about whether or not you should be running Teferi in your blue-black deck, but they can absolutely agree on what the coolest basic lands to be showing up in LA are.
Yeah, these are the lucky lands for the weekend, folks.
Arguel's Bloodfast coming down. It is 1 card advantage engine after the other. He does answer the Glint Sleeve Siphoner, and that is immediately followed up by Arguel's Bloodfast. Can at any time pay 2 mana, a black and a colorless, draw a card, lose 2 life, but he'll be keeping his hand nice and full.
And he gets to leave that mana untapped, threatening to either negate and or censor something like a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Corey, helpless, just has to watch as Matthew Nikolai continues to draw extra cards. Glint Sleeve Siphoner already pulled him ahead on card advantage, and now with this Bloodfast in play, things are looking absolutely incredible for Matthew.
Yep, down to 1 energy after activating that, but at this point, the mana is not going to be nearly as much of an issue. It's a Glimmer of Genius for Baumeister at the end step, and it looks like we are going to try and fire off this Arguel's Bloodfast in response, see if we can find some kind of way to contend with this opposing card advantage. Otherwise, you know, you draw a card, I draw a card. 1 for 1s. And there is the negate, so we're going to be able to fight over this one. 2 mana remains, and for Baumeister, 1 mana is very unlikely to do it. That's going to head to the graveyard. He's going to untap, and now I think he might be looking at something like this Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, when it's against only 2 mana. What's the worst that could happen when Nikolai just fired down a negate?
And Corey basically needs to go for the Teferi here. If he doesn't go for Teferi, then...
Censor!
Yeah, then he just gets run over by the Bloodfast. Had to walk into that Censor, and this was basically the turn that Matthew Nikolai won the game.
That's got to be the worst thing that can happen, by the way, right? Like, of all the cards that are going to counter your Teferi, it's the one that you have to pay 1 more, and then you immediately follow it up with a land that enters the battlefield tapped. That's got to feel the worst, right?
Oh, I think regardless of what it is, it feels the same. He wanted that Teferi to resolve, and it didn't.
And so his being tapped out means that the shields are down for Nikolai to then deploy the Scarab God. Still has the 2 mana remaining to activate this Arguel's Bloodfast. Another mana comes down for Baumeister. But the lid is just about shut on this game. He's going to really need a nice sequence of things to happen for him to come away with a win here.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about it a bunch at this point, but card advantage is really the name of the game in a matchup like this, and Bloodfast is just such an incredible engine here. Matthew Nikolai, despite a mulligan, way ahead on cards at this point.
And with this duress, we are going to take a look. We see negate, disallow, and then floating off at the side, out of the sideboard, it is Chromium the Mutable, and it is castable right now. Look to see this card joining the fray shortly. Now, it cannot get taken by duress, so that's going to have to go after this negate or this disallow.
Yeah, and that could change things.
That's a big
Here,
7-7.
I was thinking that this game was over and done with, and I forgot about that very, very beautiful Chromium sitting in Corey's sideboard here.
Yeah, that's a card that when it first got previewed, really the control players were rejoicing, talking about this massive finisher with flash. Couldn't be really interacted with by counter spells and couldn't really be interacted with by removal. That card just really does it all, and it is just at a very high initial price.
Yeah, this is exactly what Corey needs to be able to win the game. Matthew Nikolai's life total already down to 13, thanks to him having drawn all those extra cards. There are no creatures in the graveyard for this Scarab God to reanimate right now. It means that the Chromium potentially could win the race, depending on what's in Matthew's hand.
Now, what we saw there was that the Scarab got attacked. What you might be wondering is why did Corey not flash in the Chromium, which is a 7-7, and block it just to prevent the damage? But notice now that Nikolai has got this Vraska's Contempt in hand, and the way that this activated ability of Chromium works is that you discard a card. Sure, it gains hexproof for the turn, but it also becomes a 1-1. And so if there had been a block on this Scarab God followed up by that Vraska's Contempt, sure, Corey can try and protect it by giving it hexproof, but then it's a 1-1 until end of turn in combat with the Scarab God.
Yeah.
That's not a winning fight. We saw it in the lore of Amonkhet. It did not end well.
It did not end well at all. And, I mean, it makes things even worse because if he did activate that, put it down to a 1-1, and then it died, then Matthew Nikolai could bring it back to life with the Scarab God.
As the 7-7?
So it would be a 4-4, but it would still be pretty impressive.
So there's the 7-7 turning sideways, and it's able to be in this fray. It's not going to be on blocking duty. And now we have got this engine of Chromium that really only needs 2 swings uninterrupted. And we see Baumeister, he's holding on to negate. He's holding on to disallow. We saw those from the duress. This might be the card that can get him in.
Yeah, I think Corey found a way to win this game. I am flabbergasted. I'm so excited about watching Chromium the Mutable steal one because Corey still has 2 hard counters in hand, right? He has a negate and he has a disallow.
Yep.
So all he has to do is protect this dragon, protect this house.
And right now, the mana base, sure, there's there I think is 2 Vraska's Contempt and a Jace's Defeat in hand. And I think we see Nikolai transforming this for that very reason. If he had found a land, he would have had access to Vraska's Contempt, Jace's Defeat, and Vraska's Contempt. And I think as it sits right now, I think he's coming up just shy on being able to have 3 ways to try and remove this card in response to Corey Baumeister's 2 ways to stop that.
Yeah. Now, it's important to note that the Temple of Aklazats, I believe, can sacrifice the Scarab God, providing Matthew with enough of a pad to his life total to allow him to survive through an additional attack. Then maybe he can, choke Corey's mana by forcing Corey to tap a whole bunch of mana on this turn to protect the Chromium, and then attempt to levy a comeback on the following turn.
Yeah, and that is something that is absolutely going to be relevant. That Temple of Aklazats, it's just tap, sacrifice a creature, gain life equal to its toughness, and with that Scarab God always returning to toughness, it's a pretty powerful engine that we've seen in a lot of these grinding matchups. So, with Vraska's Contempt coming down at Chromium the Mutable, and now it is time for Baumeister to decide. He does have quite a few options. Beyond the counter magic, there's the very simple solution of just discarding a card and making it a 1-1 with hexproof until end of turn, and that cannot be interacted with by any counter magic.
It's true.
But we're going to go ahead and start this fight with a negate. There is 5 mana remaining for Nikolai. Does have another copy of Vraska's Contempt, though that does seem a little bit riskier. It's getting into a fight when you know that Baumeister has got this other way out of just discarding a card. It seems like a risky fight to fight.
Well, I mean, the thing is that Matthew actually has a bit of insurance.
With this temple?
The temple.
Yeah.
Even if he's able to prevent all of these removal spells from hitting the Chromium, he can still sacrifice the Scarab God to the temple and then return it to his hand on the following turn. Of course, if he does that, he loses all pressure on Corey. And if he loses all pressure on Corey, then he finds himself in a situation where he's up against a wall against Chromium.
Yep, and while it is gaining 5 every turn for Nikolai in that scenario, of course the Chromium is swinging in for 7, so it really just becomes this kind of 2 damage clock, and we are going to fire this one up to put that Scarab God into the graveyard, gain 5 life. It's the Chromium, the Mutable, attacking back in, but if you just run the quick math, this is going to put Nikolai down to 2. Even playing the Scarab God, sacrificing it again, that's 7, and that does not line up well against the 7/7 stats of Chromium.
It does not. So Matthew Nikolai, I mean, he can force the Chromium to be shrunk on the following turn, perhaps with a removal spell, while also having a Scarab God. And then if he's able to do that for through a series of turns where he's also sacrificing things to Temple, I suppose there is a way he possibly could win. But it looks like Chromium the Mutable and just protecting Chromium the Mutable has been good enough to allow Corey to come back and win a game where things looked very, very bad for him. He was brutally outcarded. You look over at Nikolai's hand, and he's just got a stacked grip there. Just tons and tons of cards to use. Tons of cards that are great action in a matchup like this. Corey's down to very little.
One really good instant speed interaction we could see here, by the way, I think I spotted a Torrential Gearhulk in the hand of Matthew Nikolai, and that might be a tool that he could use as forcing this Chromium the Mutable to really lessen itself in size and then also have the ability to actually attack back, getting both that removal spell and a way to apply pressure. Looks like that's not going to be his game plan at the moment. He might be really trying to make sure that he can keep buffering his life total and put together something like that later.
Yeah, so now the Temple only puts Matthew up to 7 here. And remember, this Chromium's power is 7, so Matthew's got to have something.
There is 4 mana right now, though really it's probably 3 mana because that Temple of Aclazotz, while it is a land that can tap for mana, it also needs to tap itself to sacrifice a creature. And we are going to go ahead and use that full 4 mana, pointing it right at it. And if this is going to be a counterspell, then this is going to be the full swing needed. Oh no, it's going to be a response of Vraska's Contempt on the Scarab God. This is going to put Corey Baumeister up to 8, exiling that one. And now this is still on the stack. Corey might be just looking. He's going to discard this Swamp to the Chromium the Mutable. That is going to turn it into a 1/1 human with Hexproof. Can't be blocked. Just strolling into the village to see how things are going. You know? What's going on here? Like, have you heard about that dragon up on the other side of the battlefield? Sounds terrifying. I wouldn't know anything about it, me.
And this is a scary situation again. Matthew Nikolai had 1, facing down a 7/7 flyer. If he has 2 removal spells, though, Corey only has 1 card left in hand to protect this Chromium. Matthew, he does have a lot more cards in hand. It's not unreasonable to imagine a situation where he has 2 different removal spells.
Also, he can always go for the instant speed Torrential Gearhulk, try and get at least one of those removal spells, and then sacrifice it to the Temple of Aclazotz to gain 6 life. Now, that again does only put him at that number 7, and there's going to be a lot more required, but it gives him another potential way to rebuffer his life total.
Exactly, and if the Chromium's only hitting for 1, then it might be enough.
Oh, and it's going to be Glentsleeve Siphoner that comes down. Upkeep, it's Torrential Gearhulk, and we are looking to force Corey to make a decision right now. There is the Vraska's Contempt. We're going to discard this card. It's going to be a 1/1 until the end of turn, and Matthew Nikolai has the ability to just, at the end step, if he wants to, get rid of this Torrential Gearhulk and find himself back up to 7 life. This dragon does look terrifying, but for the entirety of this turn, it is going to be a 1/1.
Yeah. Now, Corey, if he draws something like a Disallow, then he could potentially counter the activated ability on that Temple of Aclazotz. It could give him a win right now. Doesn't do it.
Nope. So we're going to gain 6 life, and that is going to leave Nikolai at 6. He is just dancing with death on this battlefield. His life total has been all over the place at the end of this game. Now, I think I see another copy of the Scarab God in hand.
As do I.
There it is. The last card in hand is a land, but now keep an eye on this one as well. There's a Torrential Gearhulk in the graveyard and the Scarab God. So even the idea of paying that 4 mana, getting back a Torrential Gearhulk, and firing off of Vraska's Contempt, Baumeister might be slipping back behind.
Yeah, I think Baumeister is all but out of this game now, actually. With the Torrential Gearhulk coming back, this is going to force Corey to turn this into a 1-1 again. He's only going to be able to attack Matthew Nikolai down to 5, and then Matthew Nikolai would have a lethal swing back on the other end.
Corey, you were supposed to play Chromium the Mutable, not Invisible Stalker. You paid 7 for it.
I mean, Corey played this game really well, lined things up. It's just, we talked earlier about how good, rather how important just card advantage is, how good Argyll's Bloodfast is. Matthew Nikolai got way ahead on cards really early in this game. Even though Corey had the Chromium the Mutable, even though he was able to pressure Matthew's life total in that way, Matthew was able to maneuver his way around, played this game beautifully. That Scarab God activation, getting back the Torrential Gearhulk, padding his life total over and over with his Temple of Akhlazats. Just a beautiful game played by Matthew on the mulligan here.
I mean, he has been continually threading the needle when it comes down to his life total at multiple points, finding himself at 1 life, 2 life, going back up to 7, back up to 8, back up to 6, just dancing around this card, combining that with the Torrential Gearhulk and especially with the Scarab God. We're going to bring back a copy of this Glintleaf Siphoner, and that means that we can pay that 2 energy if we want to. We're going to go ahead and get that Scry first, and having that Glintleaf Siphoner enter the battlefield means that there is the 2 energy required. Could go down to 5. Doesn't look like we're going to make that gamble, though. The cards in hand will do. Doomfall here, and that has got to be targeting Corey Baumeister to have him exile a creature that he controls. Oh, and he's going to flash in Torrential Gearhulk. He's going to be able to...
Could this change things again? I don't know.
This is a great card to draw here. Now, he is going to have to likely exile one of these 2, unless that was for some reason pointing at Baumeister's hand, which I don't expect, but that's going to mean that it's a disallow for Corey, who is going to try and counter this Doomfall, and if that is successful, I don't know if that ends up changing this math at all. The Mutable still needs to actually get in a swing over the top, and it's still contending with this Temple of Akhlazats. I have a hard time thinking that this is going to be quite enough. And that Temple is really the part that I'm looking at there. When you've got the Scarab God, when you've got this Torrential Gearhulk, that is 2 4/4s, a 5/5, and this 2/1, all of them able to put, well, I guess 3 of them able to put Nikolai out of the range of this Chromium the Mutable. 3 mana remains for Nikolai, really 4 mana, but again, that Temple of Akhlazats is sort of already dedicated to one purpose, though if it is something that is really going to help Nikolai stay alive, then he can really invest 4 mana into it.
Absolutely, and we've watched Argyll's Bloodfast and Temple of Akhlazats, both sides of that card, just be absolutely crucial to Matthew's victory here.
We're going to cycle a land. It's an irrigated farmland. And is it just time? If this is something like that disallow, he might have been hoping to save that to use the Torrential Gearhulk as a way to get back disallow and counter the activated ability of the Temple. He was forced to use that because of the Doomfall instead. And we're just passing the turn back. Matthew Nikolai, remember, he can start, he's still going to be making Corey lose 2 life. He's got this Scry 2, and the opponent loses 2 life because of the Scarab God, equal to the number of zombies you control. We see that in the Torrential Gearhulk as well as the Glintleaf Siphoner.
So Matthew Nikolai just found Commit Memory on the top of his library, and I think this could be it.
And that is so. Baumeister going to pick him up, and it is going to be a game 3 that these players have got to head to. Beautifully played by Matthew Nikolai at every stage of that game. Even in the early turns, a massive risk using these 2 Ether Hubs, the energy created by them and that Glintleaf Siphoner to just draw the card, and that just set the tone. He was going to be the one making the actions, getting the extra cards in hand, and making Baumeister respond.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible. That was one of those games where the person who was winning the game kept going back and forth. Matthew, starting on a mulligan, having his first 2 lands of the game be Ether Hubs, spending his energy on a Glintleaf Siphoner, going down to 0 energy with just 2 Ether Hubs on the battlefield, on the mulligan, then finding an Argyll's Bloodfast, grinding card advantage up, Then it looked like Corey couldn't win. He was just buried in card advantage. Then Corey casts Chromium the Mutable, starts taking chunks out of Matthew's life total, which was already low because of the Argos Bloodfast. Matthew able to stay alive at 1 at multiple occasions by sacrificing creatures to Temple of Akelzatz before eventually grinding his way to victory by using all those extra cards he accrued in the early turns. Just an incredible, incredible game to watch.
Yeah,
that was a treat.
Heading into this game, you even said we are about to be watching really high-level, talented Magic between two decks that are going to step out of this sideboarding realm ready to rumble and ready to have a fight, and we saw it there. We're going to go ahead and begin Game 3 here, and it is going to be a couple of lands that are going to be kicking things off. All right, so we are going to see a duress here, and it's going to take that Search for Azcanta. It is Walking Ballista left in the hand alongside a Glimmer of Genius. 2 lands left remaining, drawing the card for the turn. Corey Baumeister, he is on the play, and he is going to waste no time, waste no mana. It's going to be Walking Ballista hitting the battlefield.
Yeah, notice how Corey has the cards that were revealed off to rest flipped up on the table. He's revealing them to Matthew. Matthew and he both realize that they need to play this game very quickly in order to finish the match. Only 4 minutes remaining on the clock. Corey wants to leave those face up to prevent Matthew from having to write them down, just saving time here.
And it looks like the players, may have had the opportunity during a little bit of a small moment on Corey's turn while he's making actions. Nikolai was able to take advantage of that moment to write down the cards, just saving time overall to make sure that the pace of the game is progressing. Search for Azcanta hits the battlefield. We saw it removed from Baumeister's hand, just like a magic trick. Suddenly it appears in Nikolai, and it is going to be on the battlefield. So it is a Walking Ballista up against the Search for Azcanta. 4 mana available. Could start investing it into this Walking Ballista, but otherwise plenty of other options. But now you have this nice little threat of activation, threat of anything else that might be in hand, but Corey will always have something to do.
Yeah, and the fact that Corey is able to leave open this 4 mana means that he can counter anything that's especially important. He can cast things like Glimmer of Genius on Matthew's end step, or he can threaten to make this Walking Ballista larger to close the game faster. With only 3 minutes left on the clock, Corey's greatly incentivized to make plays that could end this game very fast.
We see him fire off that Glimmer of Genius, but it's responded to by Nikolai with a Censor. Counter target spell unless their controller pays 1. Unable to do so, so that's going to hit the bin. A tapped land comes down from Corey, and it's going to be the Walking Ballista continuing. This time, we're going to activate a response to that with this Commit to Memory. Let's go ahead and bury this card while it is still at 1. A decision point for Baumeister. Do you allow this card into your library, or do you fire off the singular damage at Nikolai? And it looks like that's what we're going to do. It's going to be Nikolai jumping down to 15 and an untap here from Baumeister. Got to be feeling good, though. It's Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. The shields were down, and he is taking advantage of it. An island joining the battlefield, and now he's got 3 mana available. A lot of counterspells at that converted mana cost. Could be disallow, could be negate. But on the other side, Nikolai looking for the opportunity to play down and deploy this Argos Bloodfast. We saw it really take control of the game last time. He'll have 4 mana remaining. Here it comes down, and now we're going to see if that 3 mana for Baumeister is able to contend with it, or if he is going to be fine with it, which he is, or he's unable to stop it. And now it is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, up against both Search for Azcanta and Argos Bloodfast. This is just Ixalan versus Dominaria right now. There's Field of Ruin and Teferi, and looks like there's going to be a little bit of a Glimmer of Genius.
Yeah, and just an all-out card advantage war, both players only caring about making their hands larger despite the clock being this low. I mean, Corey had counter magic there for the Argos Bloodfast. Definitely taking the clock into account right now in this game here. Looking to protect this Teferi at all cost, as if he can get that up to 8, he could potentially put himself in a position where it seems like there's no way Matthew could win. At this point, it looks like it's all but a draw.
Duress is going to see Essence Scatter, Essence Scatter disallow. we're going to lose one copy of that Disallow, leaving the more mana-efficient, yet more restrictive counterspell in hand, and the other cards remaining look to be Liliana Death's Majesty, as well as Arguel's Bloodfast, but that is a legendary enchantment, and we already have one on the field. It's 14 to 20. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, up to 7 counters. At what point is there the potential? I just don't know if there's the time for a Teferi ult to be able to run this game.
Yeah, I think that even if Corey does have the ability to ultimate this Teferi, create that emblem, it's still not going to be enough here. Matthew Nikolai will have enough time to turn this game into a draw. So unfortunately for both these players, it looked like they were playing for the top 8. And if they draw here, neither of them is going to make it.
One thing that is possible is we could see Corey Baumeister end up with a Chromium the Mutable in hand. And when it comes down to turns, Nikolai is at 14 if the way that the cards line up correctly works out. You know, if Corey's able to protect it during Nikolai's turn by discarding cards and protect it during his turn with specifically counterspells, which means that he does not need to turn it into a 1/1, he might be able to pull out the win.
That's true. I think Chromium the Mutable is really the card that has an opportunity to win this game.
There's going to be Sorcerer Spyglass. I imagine this is going to be naming Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, though. Really, I mean, what other options are there? There's no Arguel's Bloodfast in the opposing deck.
Yeah, so definitely naming Teferi. Sorcerer Spyglass, it's been awesome every time we've seen it played this weekend. So many of these decks really lean on Teferi very hard. The Esper Control deck, not quite as much as the Fog Nexus of Fate decks we've seen, but still, it's just such an important source of card advantage for all of the decks that play it. And Spyglass, just an excellent card at shutting that down.
So 7 mana available from the Arguel's Bloodfast player. Nikolai only at 12 right now, though. I think all of it self-inflicted. Or no, there was some from down to 15 from that Walking Ballista. That was this game. So really just the rest of it is from this Arguel's Bloodfast, trying to keep that hand as full as possible.
Yeah, he's happy to trade 2 life for a card whenever given the opportunity in this matchup.
And now that with the clock at the top reads 0, these players have got to try and come up with an answer. There is that Sorcerer Spyglass going to take a look at the hand. And once you have taken a look at the hand, you can name a card. Does not need to have to be one that you saw. And it looks like Baumeister might be recognizing the situation. He needs Chromium the Mutable. He's only going to get 2 draws at it. And this Sorcerer Spyglass resolving means that he only gets 1 shot at it. There's the Disallow. I don't think he has the capacity to take this one on. It is Glimmer of Genius as well as Essence Scatter. We're going to name Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and Baumeister might be relying entirely on this Glimmer of Genius and his draw stat.
Yeah, no way to get that Sorcerer Spyglass off the table in Corey's deck except for Teferi. So with the Teferi turned off, that Spyglass will be in play for the remainder of the game.
We saw Corey keep 1 card on top of his library. Here's the draw for the turn, and it looks like it actually might be 2 copies of Glintsleeve Siphoner. I wonder if he's got some potential there to try and make this game come together for him. And actually, you know, earlier we did see...
Oh, they have time extension.
Because Baumeister left his seat earlier, and so
that's true.
They have got a couple of extra turns here. We're not quite at that point. There is still hope for these players not to go to turn.
Also, worth noting, Corey has 1 copy of Forsake the Worldly. So he does have an out to the Sorcerer Spyglass.
Yes, so now we're going to be seeing when does that time extension end. I don't have that information in front of me at the moment, but at a certain point we're going to see a die enter the battlefield kind of in the center, and it's going to be on 1. And that is going to start ticking up to turn 5. So that is the situation as it stands. That's why we haven't seen that just yet. Sorcerer Spyglass and Arguel's Bloodfast, but now these players very aware. And it looks like we are going to be entering into turn 0.
It's going to be difficult for either player to win in this time frame.
No, really, when you're on turn 0, it means that both players have got, you know, aside from Nexus of Fate, which isn't going to matter here, 3 turns in which they get to really try and make their game plan, push it forward. These Glintsleeve Siphoners cannot get it done individually, even if they go uncontested, which they do have Menace, and they're up against...
Oh, they can. There's you know... Oh, not anymore. Of course, Corey would have 3 attacks. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So with the Torrential Gearhulk, it's going to be back in action, and there's also a Champion of Wits. So for Corey, now that Menace no longer relevant, he's going to have to rely on some other way to get this done, though he does have that Essence Scatter in hand that we saw previously. He might be interested in pointing this out just because it means that his Menace stays relevant. It means that his Teferi is able to continue. You know, even the attacks against the Teferi are less relevant. And there's that die that I talked about before, a 1 as we head into Corey Baumeister's turn. These players are fighting for top 8, and a draw isn't going to cut it.
So Corey's Glintsleeve Siphoner, it really wants to attack the face because they're in turns, but obviously he's going to use it to kill the Liliana this turn.
He's just...
I mean, he absolutely has to.
The last card's in hand, by the way. It looks like it is still that other copy of Argol's Bloodfest. And I think it's a Vraska's Contempt. So even if there is that Chromium the Mutable, it would have to, you know, find some way to actually counter a removal spell to maintain those attacks. For Nikolai, I'm trying to run through some of the options, but is there any way to deal actually 19 points of damage at this stage in the game when you're only going to have 2 more turns? I just don't see it myself.
I suppose hypothetical Scarab God into like land Scarab God, reanimate, having 14 points of power on the board after attacking for 5 if Corey chose not to block, then being able to find ways to clear the way for an attack on the following turn.
All right, well, that's going to be the order as it needs to be filled. It's going to be another Glintsleeve Siphoner that comes down for Baumeister. We know that he's got another one at the top of his deck or near the top of his deck. Right now, Nikolai is still at 10. We saw that Glintsleeve Siphoner turn sideways, but it was pointing itself towards Liliana to clear that one off the battlefield, and now Vraska's Contempt is pointing itself at this Glintsleeve Siphoner, trying to reduce the amount of pressure. Now, Corey does have access to a Disallow. Is this going to be a card that he values enough? And I think at this stage of the game, he might have to.
Yeah, I mean, this game has been played in a strange fashion because of the time constraints. It's been an odd one. Here, it's looking like the game is very likely going to end up being a draw. Corey, though, is going to get 3 draws here.
You know,
on his turn, so he's going to get 1 more turn after that, after he attacks with both those.
Ooh.
Yeah, if near Deadlands, one that I'd forgotten about earlier in the game. I had been thinking about it, but been there for a while now. Corey needs to be able to have this Glintsleeve Siphoner get in, put Matthew down to 8. Then needs to have drawn Chromium the Mutable, needs to be able to cast it on the following turn, and needs to be able to get in for that full 9 in the following turn. And that is Corey's route to victory. And I don't even know if it works with the Bloodfast on the other side of the table. So I think that this one is going to end in a draw, barring one of these players conceding to the other.
There's a Vraska's Contempt aimed at the Torrential Gearhulk. That means that even if the Argol's Bloodfast does transform, but the other flip side is now with only 5 mana available, it can't be a Chromium the Mutable. It costs 7. It's got to be something like that. We're now in turn 4, and we are going to try and we're going to exile this Champion of Wits. We're going to bring back the 4/4 to draw 4 cards, then discard 2. This is going to be the Lone Sentinel saying farewell to this game, because with only 1 mana remaining, there's just not a whole lot of options. This is Nikolai trying to find, you know, is there any card in this deck? You know, I could play down a land and maybe hold up a negate, sure. But the options at this point are minimal for Nikolai. And for Baumeister, I just don't see what's going to actually get it done. Glintsleeve Siphoner comes down. He's going to untap. This is turn 5. He's got a very tall order to fill, and pending that he suddenly has the capacity to splash a mountain in a Banefire, I think this is going to be a draw. Cycling of the land here, and I think that is going to be the end of this story. These 2 players not able to come away with the win. I think they're taking a little bit of a moment here, and yeah, just looking at him here, this matchup meant so much for him. There's the handshake from them, and he is going to be walking away from this one disappointed.
Yeah, and that's got to be really disappointing for both of these guys right now. Corey, I mean, if he made the finals of this tournament, he would have gotten to platinum. Has to settle for a draw. Matthew, he's been having, a lot of success over the last few months, and here I'm sure he's disappointed to not add a Grand Prix top 8 to that. Beautifully played by both players. Really impressive stuff. It's a joy to watch.
A phenomenal showcasing of what those decks are capable at the end of the day. But, of course, there is still more magic. The top 8 is on the horizon. We're going to be bringing it to you. Stick around here at Grand Prix Los Angeles. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. It is still round 15 here. We're still in the red zone, getting ready for this top 8, and we have got another match to bring you of two players battling it out to end up in that top 8. So, heading into this one, we are going to have blue-white approach up against red-black aggro. This is a matchup, the red-black aggro we've seen all day, but we have I don't think we've had the opportunity of really seeing it up against this blue-white deck. Or actually, we did before, didn't we? With the Abrades up against, or this is approach.
Yeah,
I'm
this
all
is
over the
blue-white
place.
approach.
What am I
Yeah, no, a
doing?
lot has happened. I
My
mean, we've already
goodness.
been in the booth for over 2 hours.
That
this
match.
round. that was a crazy match that we just had the opportunity to watch. So the elephant in the room.
Yes.
With this match. I mean, if we're gonna watch it, I guess there's, we have to tell you who we're going to be watching. We're watching Alex Bertoncini, and he's playing against Vidianto Wijaya. So Alex Bertoncini is on blue-white approach, and Vidianto Wijaya is playing red-black aggro. No.
All right, so let's head on down and let's see what happens. We'll see you there. All right, jumping down into game 1, it is going to be a blue land, and it's going to be a Beaumont courier following it up so that we can get the attack in for 1. Now that is going to be putting a card underneath it, and it's going to be a basic plains coming down for Bertoncini, and that is going to be right back to it. It is red-black aggro up against blue-white approach, an archetype that we have not had the opportunity to see just yet. And it is going to be Seal Away that takes down the Beaumont Courier. So that Beaumont Courier is going to end up off the battlefield in exile. Third land coming on down, and it's going to be a cycling of the Canyon Slough. Another card in hand there for Wijaya. We're going to throw down a Goblin Chain Whirler, deal 1 damage to Bertoncini. No! It's going to be Disallow, cutting it off and keeping the board clear. So 4 mana for Bertoncini, and it's going to be right back. Mountain. The top of the screen says red-black or black-red aggro, but right now you could have fooled me. It's just the Canyon Slough that ended up in the graveyard that has shown any indication of this being a 2-color deck. It's Rekindling Phoenix entering the battlefield, and that's going to be followed up by a Glimmer of Genius. Scry 2, draw 2, gain 2 energy. How do you feel about Approach's matchup against this black-red aggro deck? When you're running a card, your win condition says gain 7 life.
So I think against more traditional black-red aggro decks, this blue-white approach deck is probably highly favored. What's interesting here is that Vidianto Wijaya is not playing the type of black-red aggro deck that we've seen throughout the weekend so much. He is playing Hazoret the Fervent. That's something that's very different than these other black-red aggro decks we've been watching.
So just to cut you off there really quick, we did see Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, enter the battlefield protected by a Seal Away, and that is going to leave that on the battlefield. It's followed up by a Chandra, Torch of Defiance. We're likely going to see that one tick up and just deal a couple of points of damage. Please continue. It was Hazoret.
Yeah, so the inclusion of Hazoret in Vidianto Wijaya's deck, it definitely changes the way he plays. He is not so much a red-black deck as he has a red deck that is simply splashing for a pair of unlicensed disintegrations and the ability to flashback ribbons and scrap heap scrounger. So he is much more a mono red centric deck that is merely splashing black.
So 6 mana on the battlefield. We're lining up 4 of it for a cast out. These spells just keep on coming. Answer after answer after answer, and it is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, fueling it all, being able to draw 2 cards per turn, untap that mana, contain it all, and it looks like we have decided that that is enough for us. It's into game 2, Bertoncini taking game 1, and that is going to be a Mountain, but no Beaumont Courier to kick things off. This deck is running those main deck Glorybringers as well.
So we've talked at length about the importance of Beaumont Courier in these types of matchups.
Yeah.
The fact that Vidi did not have those in the first or second game is just really, really disheartening for his game plan here. He needs to be able to apply that early pressure if he wants a chance of winning this match, and he's not able to do that. And as a result, Alex is just at a major advantage, especially in that first game. Here, Vidi off to a reasonably aggressive start. Alex has his work cut out for him to fight his way back into this one.
Yeah, we saw Karizev come down to the battlefield on turn 2. On turn 3, it's able to attack in for 3 itself with 1 power, as well as Ragavan entering the battlefield. And then a Heart of Kirin is going to follow it up. Now, right now, crewing that Heart is going to be a little bit tricky. While Karizev attacks for 3, does not crew for 3. That monkey is not interested in holding the wheel.
Yeah, it can only come into onto the battlefield once the Karizev is attacking.
And we are going to see a duress come down. We're taking a look at the hand, and we see Settle the Wreckage, Lyra Dawnbringer, Fumigate, Torrential Gearhulk, as well as 3 lands, which is going to really round out the mana to cast all of these. So we've got a 4 mana, 2 5 mana, and a 6 mana spell. We can only really stop the 2 board wipes, which are great against Wijaya. But that Lyra Dawnbringer is absolutely a threat that Vidianto is going to make some considerations for, because now that he knows that this is in the game plan, a lot of his game, he needs to be prepared for it. And he's got a couple of turns to do that, but if he misses, then he will likely lose.
I think that's absolutely true, and I also think it's extremely unlikely that Vidianto Wijaya still has cards like Unlicensed Disintegration in his deck after losing to an approach deck in Game 1. So Lyra Dawnbringer is going to be a major problem for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's a card that Alex ends up using to secure victory in this match.
So we saw the duress to kick things off. There is still 3 red mana. It's going to be Pia Nalar. The pressure is going to keep on mounting. That Settle the Wreckage being off the battlefield means that the combat can continue. Heart of Kirin crewed up by Pia Nalar. Now that's a nice little flavor win, and it's going to be the attack in for 7. Now Bertoncini plays down the 4th land. We know that that Settle the Wreckage is gone, so
he needs something here, because if Vidianto Wijaya ends up having a way to crew this,
like a
he
Chandra?
has 10 points of power now, and he took the only 4 mana play out of Alex's hand there with the Settle the Wreckage. Alex needed to top deck something on this previous turn. Otherwise, Vidianto Wijaya is going to be able to take this one right now.
And Vidianto's got plenty of options. Could play down both the Goblin Chain Whirler or that Chandra or the Hazoret. All 3 of those perfectly capable of hopping inside this Heart of Kirin and riding it across the finish line.
Yeah, needed to decide whether or not he wanted to play around Censor or Essence Scatter there, or or Negate. I mean, any number of different cards answer the cards which Vidianto could play to attempt to win.
Oh, man. When you've got these decks that are running all kinds of negates, essence scatters, and yeah, that Censor is definitely going to be an interesting one. But it looks like he made the right call. That is going to be Chandra Torch of Defiance crewing up the Heart of Kirin. We're going ahead and getting the count up, and that is going to be it's 4 mana, and he puts down that Glacial Fortress. Go ahead and a little bit of a tease there.
Yeah. Was not the settle off the top. Oh, here, Vidi with the Beaumont Courier on turn 1. That's going to be a really important tool in this match. We've watched all throughout this weekend just how important it is for these red decks to start off with a Beaumont Courier when they're playing against these blue-white Teferi-based strategies.
And especially with the Beaumont Courier, you told me this yesterday at the very beginning of the day, and I was asking you, what is it about Beaumont Courier? Is it the haste? What is it that really makes this such a crucial way to start the game? Seal Away taking down one of these. And it's not just the fact that it gets down and starts swinging. It's the fact that eventually you are going to run out of cards as they're countered, as they're answered. And that Beaumont Courier existing as a way to refill your hand later in the game is going to be massive.
Exactly, and because of that, it's a 1-mana creature that demands a removal spell from the opponent, and unless they have a Fatal Push, that removal, or a Magma Spray or something like that, they are going to be spending more mana than you spent on that Beaumont Courier, and they need the removal spell at just the right time, making it just an incredible card.
Beaumont Courier attacking in. We saw a Search for Escanta, and it looks like, it's turn 3. It's got to be, Chain Whirler entering the scene. That's going to deal a damage, the 3/3, and the draw. That could be the follow-up next turn for Wijaya is going to be Chandra Torch of Defiance, potentially, unless there's a better option. Though Bertoncini with 3 mana right now does have that Glacial Fortress. Last time, we saw that as a way to accept the game loss, and now this time it's going to enter in the battlefield and really try and actually be a part of the game. back to Wijaya. Chain Whirler and a Beaumont Courier. 2 cards underneath this Courier. There are lands in hand, and now some of the consideration. There's also Scrap Heap Scrounger in hand. So with this 4th mana, a couple of different ways to apply this pressure, and I think it's very similar to last time. What's the game plan? How much do you want to give Bertoncini the ability to interact with 4 open mana?
Yeah, now the thing is 4 mana could mean so many different things out of Alex's deck. It could mean that he's leaving up Glimmer mana. It could mean a cast out. It could mean Settle the Wreckage. The number of things that could entail is so wide that it's really hard to play around any one card specifically.
And we see Wijaya actually hold off on deploying the Chandra, and the cast out eliminates the Scrap Heap Scrounger. So 4 mana and sort of the read on that removal spell. It's going to be Fumigate to follow it up. There is the red mana. Are you willing to sacrifice the Chandra and a land for 3 mystery cards? They could be anything.
They could be anything.
3 Hazarets?
What's in the box? I mean, what if it's like something really good?
I mean, it did not go so well for Pandora, but I think Teferi's Puzzle Box ended out pretty well.
Yeah, and I think, oh, wow, okay. All right, I think that's an aggressive play because Chandra is a really powerful follow-up. The thing is, if he did just go for that Chandra, he probably would have gotten...
Hazaret.
Oh, wow, that's good.
That's really good.
Yeah. Oh, if that was a land, that would have been really, really nice, but it wasn't.
It is a duress, though, so I think we might be looking at duress into PNLR, and then you're looking at the ability, you're back up to having 2 of these aggressive creatures, which means that Seal Away and Cast Out aren't great ways to just prevent it entirely. And depending on what the draw is, you could be looking at attacking for 8 with Hazaret next turn.
Yeah, oh, so I was mistaken. I misread the hand. So I actually really, really love what he drew. I think it was just about perfect.
Goblin Chain Whirler also in hand right now. Just good living.
Yeah, Alex. Ooh.
Torrential Gearhole coming on down. That is dangerous.
Yeah, it doesn't have any spells to flash back, but just a 5/6 flash here. It's going to chomp up this PNLR and give Alex a pretty reasonable board presence. Then Vidyanto Wijaya, he's only gotten Alex down to 12 after this combat step, and that's not a good place to be once your opponent has this much land in play and has Memorial to Genius and has a body in play that's capable of blocking a Hazaret ad nauseum.
Torrential Gearhulk, it's got Flash, it's Saver of the Universe, and it's trying to really patch things together for Bertoncini here in Game 3. This is the match to determine who gets into the top 8. Looks like we are going to go ahead and activate this PNLR, sacrifice an artifact, falter this Torrential Gearhulk, so it is unable to block. That leaves 3 mana remaining for the turn after this hit in for 2, and it looks like it's going to be Kari Zev choosing to go for this Menace creature that again puts out multiple attackers as opposed to the Goblin Chain Whirler, which, while dealing 1 damage, would then have sort of hit its limit on its usability against this 5/6.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting consideration. I think that a lot of people might want to simply play the more expensive spell because they have Hazaret in hand. Though Kari Zev is likely able to get in, a few more like hot pokes with the Menace ability, if you will. Just like the rapier that she carries. She's like,
leave it in the fire a little bit just to get a little bit of an extra dig in. Yeah, sure. All right, it's PNLR. Unlicensed Disintegration is the draw. Now that ain't a bad way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to deal with this Torrential Gearhulk, assuming that Alex does not have a piece of counter magic in hand.
You mean like that one?
Like that one. That's just like the one I was thinking of.
That's disallow. That's going to stop this Unlicensed Disintegration, and that is going to crumble. Or disintegrate, really, the hopes and dreams of this unlicensed activity. So it's an attack in with the Kari Zev, blocking the token. It's 1 damage with Menace, getting its swings in. Irrigated Farmland's going to cycle, draw a card, heading into the draw step here, and we also have this Search for Azcanta. So taking a look at the top card, it can go to the graveyard. It looks like that will be the case, and I believe that was a land that ended up in there. So now we are back to 7 lands, and now that they have Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, over Search for Azcanta, this is a huge advantage for Bertoncini.
Yeah, Alex Bertoncini just this game is all but one for him. It looks like his hand is just about perfect too right now. He has a cast out. He has a I believe he also has a disallow in hand, so he can counter anything that Vianto Wijaya plays. If Wijaya is able to fight through and resolve some sort of spell that could continue to apply pressure, Alex has cast out to deal with that. Just an embarrassment of riches at this point. This Torrential Gear Hulk holding down the fort. The only thing Alex doesn't have going for him at this point is that if he has to use the cast out, then he wouldn't be able to activate Escon to the Sunken Ruin on the same turn. Although he could easily use his disallow and activate.
All right, and it looks like it might be time for a duress. There is still that Chain Whirler in hand. What can we see? Oh, all right. Disallow is just going to eliminate it. It's very possible that that would have been the take anyway, and now it's just a matter of the information is lost to history.
And actually, that was a nice draw step from Wijaya there. That means that he's going to be able to cast Hazaret on the following turn, and that will be able to attack right away. He forced through that Goblin Chain Whirler. If he starts sending with everything, it's hard for Alex to block with something like a Torrential Gear Hulk on the Hazaret because he's just falling further and further behind on the board. Wijaya, really nice play there. This cast down going to be very important for Alex.
Essence Scatter in hand. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, he has the Essence Scatter and he has the cast down. So, Alex doesn't need anything. Alex has it all.
All right, so plenty of options. Ipnu Rivulets is the draw, and of course it is all backed up by Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. So this game is really starting to solidify for Bertoncini. While he is at that lower life total, he is only at 8. His opponent, Wijaya, at 20. Really, we have seen this shift in the center of power in this. And while there is going to be that Hazaret on the battlefield, there is an answer in hand. And things are just going to really continue getting more and more difficult for Wijaya because every single one of these plays does not cost so much mana that Bertoncini isn't able to activate the Azcanta and continue building this.
Yeah, so just pulling further and further ahead in terms of card advantage, also getting a tremendous amount of card selection by looking at all of those cards on the top of his library here. Once Alex is able to find and approach the second sun and pad his life total, that could make things a wrap. Here, Alex likely not activating his Azcanta, instead going to use his cast out, get one of these threats off of the battlefield. He may actually go for the Kari Zev here because of the menace ability. Although the Goblin Chain Whirler seems like the most likely target, then the Torrential Gear Hulk is going to eat something else.
Looks like it is going to be that Kari Zev. Was considering a couple of them. I even saw it hovering over that Pianalar. But that menace is just a way to continually apply pressure. And we're going to see this 5/6 get in the way of the Goblin Chain Whirler. And now Pianalar stands alone against a contraption that, I mean, she probably knows all about it. She's pretty used to working with machines, but this is not one that I think she commissioned.
I do not think so. I think we probably would have known her name much sooner in Magic lore had she been the one building those Torrential Gear Hulks.
Yeah, she would have been right up there with Urza. Urza and Mishra, the original artificers.
Yeah, if their war machines had ran into some Gear Hulks, I'm sure they would have been pretty upset about it.
Well, I mean, the cards were just different then. Can you imagine a Clockwork Beast walking into a Torrential Gear Hulk? It would have been a little bit of a difficult time. Irrigated Farmlands here is going to go ahead and cycle. Now we are down to only one card remaining. So if there is a way to dig through this, it's Chain Whirler. Bertoncini is going to end up at 1, activating the search, or I'm sorry, Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. There has been just a lot of continual pressure from Wijaya, though, which means that if we are not quite able to find the right answers, there is very much the potential to sneak out a win. Now there are no copies of Lightning Strike, but only a Braids Cut to Ribbons, though a Cut to Ribbons would look pretty nice in the graveyard right now.
Yeah, Cut to Ribbons would allow Ajaya to potentially finish off the game if Alex runs out of counter magic or taps too much mana.
So we're down to 3 on Bertoncini's side of the field. It is a 5-6 standing in the way. 2 copies of Essence Scatter and a Nazcanta the Sunken Ruin. Or I'm sorry, not Essence Scatter, Disallow. So 2 of these 3-mana counter spells, passing it right back. Not going to be a whole lot of options. Wajaya's got to get it done with the 2 things that are currently sitting right on the board. Just 1 damage shy. Even an attack all out right now would come up just short, taking down that Goblin Chain Whirler, and with 1 life remaining.
Yeah, and if this Heart of Kirin resolved, which it will not, then and Alex didn't have anything in hand, Wajaya would have been able to sacrifice that heart to the Pia ability to make the Torrential Gearhulk unable to block, in which case he would have been able to attack for lethal. So if you're in Wajaya's seat right now, there are a lot of cards that you imagine will give you the ability to win this game. A single Scrap Heap Scrounger, for example, would have provided an amount of recursion and ability to fight through this Gearhulk, which would have very easily won him the game.
Bertoncini going to add a Settle the Wreckage to the hand off of this Nazcanta the Sunken Ruin and throw down an island. And now the draws for Wajaya have been very live, and if they continue to be so, it's going to keep applying pressure to this hand. I think that might have been a Scrap Heap Scrounger, if my eyes don't deceive me, which, with a glimpse that brief, it's possible. It's happened before. So Chain Whirler and Pia Nalar so far still standing guard, facing down this Torrential Gearhulk and looking for an opening. And there is that Scrap Heap Scrounger. It's the 2-mana 3/2, and if it hits this battlefield, like you said, could see it try and falter that Torrential Gearhulk. But gotta remember, we saw Bertoncini add a Settle the Wreckage to his hand off of this Nazcanta the Sunken Ruin, and more importantly, Wajaya saw it.
Yeah, and because of that, Wajaya knows that the Falter ability will not be a way to win this game right now. The Settle the Wreckage in Alex's hand is just a major issue at this point in time, and it means that the Gearhulk will be able to hold the ground basically forever, because if Wajaya wants to make an attack through that, like he's doing right now, then he's just going to kind of get blown out by this Settle.
Part of the consideration might actually just be to go for this, and then really you only need to attack with the Chain Whirler. The Pia Nalar can hang out, and then, next turn, Wajaya would be able to recur back this Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, but then you're only attacking for 2 with the Pia, so you're not even threatening lethal with the follow-up Falter, and your opponent had 2 more Azcanta activations. I guess you have to.
Maybe
you have to go for it. That's your way to do it.
Beaumont Courier
draw. You're right. You're right. You could draw Beaumont Courier in conjunction.
No. You're asking for favors.
Yeah,
from the deck.
Yeah. And also, you're asking for your opponent to double miss on the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. I'm not saying it's.
Oh, look at
that.
Just
very unlikely. Yeah. So now that's.
All right. So you were just looking in the future. I see.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's
we also had seen the extra piece of counter magic beyond that Essence Scatter that had been sitting in Alex's hand. So at this point, it's really the things that Wajaya thinks maybe could win him the game, but he doesn't know about the disallow that was already in Alex's hand. Now he also knows about this Essence Scatter, though, so he's hoping that there's some chance of fighting back into this game, but it's not looking good.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we are going to go ahead and throw that one down. It's just going to be the Settle the Wreckage, a 4-mana Path to Exile of this attacking creature, and that is going to go ahead and find Wajaya a basic mountain onto the battlefield. And similar to what you said, it's going to be a tall order at this point, because that Scrap Heap Scrounger alone, combined with this Pia Nalar, it looks great, but that can't do it enough. It would take 2 turns of this, and it would take Bertoncini never finding another way to interact with either one of those cards, because at this point, there's going to be no help coming from the top of the library for Wajaya. Too many counterspells, too many answers to just prevent these cards from hitting the battlefield.
Yeah, and a multiple Scrounger type of draw might have been able to get it done for Wijaya, but he just didn't find it. It's going to be really hard at this point for him to find a route to victory through 2 pieces of counter magic in Alex's hand.
How about something like a Scrap Heap Scrounger here? If you draw it, it gets countered, you bring it back, and then you could falter, and you're actually attacking in with the current Scrap Heap Scrounger. Now, we didn't see that. I think it was a basic mountain as the draw, and that's going to be massively disappointing.
Well, the disallow can also counter the ability.
Oh, great point.
Yeah, which is, so it's kind of like a bit of a locked up game at this point. I mean, I shouldn't say that because, I've said that in the past and I've been proven wrong by a series of crazy draws or crazy misses. But with this many activations off of Escanta the Sunken Ruin, while the life total is just really no longer under pressure despite being so low, it looks like Alex is just running away with this one.
Yeah, the biggest question for Bertoncini at this point is how do I deal 20 damage without, without being at risk? And I think eventually Bertoncini is not even going to worry about it too much. It might be just wait until you draw, approach the second sun, and patiently bide your time, gaining 7 life, and eventually you'll draw it once more. We're going to block there. It's going to be seal away on this one. Let's just throw it, get it into the graveyard rather than underneath this enchantment. And that is going to, I think, just falter the Torrential Gearhulk, which was already blocking, which does very little. But that's going to be able to come back into the realm of the battlefield rather than being trapped underneath this seal. All right, back to Bertoncini's turn. And now we do have this Torrential Gearhulk. When you have this much counter magic, probably not too worried about haste, as long as you have a way to answer the Scrap Heap Scrounger. So, Torrential Gearhulk available, and it is going to be 5 mana. We've seen a lot of 5 mana plays today, and they usually mean one thing. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, coming down to the battlefield, drawn cards, untapping lands. It's no stranger to this field at this stage in the game. Bertoncini at 3 has got to feel confident because there is that Scrap Heap Scrounger in the graveyard. We're going to exile Pia Nalar. It's back, and it's got an open field right now. If Bertoncini has nothing, then it will be able to close this game out, but that is just so...
Yeah, he already knows about Seal Away, which had been revealed off of an Escanta the Sunken Ruin.
Oh, great. Yeah, you're right.
Activation.
You're right.
And now another one. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, no is right.
If you're Wijaya, it's just... what's left, You're running through your deck list. You're trying to come up with the 1%ers. You're trying to come up with the 1-outs. And it's just so hard to think of one that actually gets it done, You're trying to start relying on a bunch of, the 2 cut to ribbons. Maybe those will come together, and there will be no counter magic. Maybe I can...
Well, he's already seen the counter magic, too. I mean, they obviously need to continue playing. I mean, he's playing for top 8. He's not going to just concede.
Fight the good fight.
There's a chance he, just catches Alex tapping out for no reason, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. You never know. Sometimes you just want to see how much mana you can add to your mana pool.
Yeah.
Right? You ever done that? And you can't really tell. Counting it up isn't nearly as satisfying as adding all of it. So, unlikely to happen, though. Bertoncini doesn't seem like the kind to really go for that kind of play. So there's going to be the Essence Scatter eliminating the Soul Scar Mage. Hey, might as well try and get it in there. But it's going to be Seal Away eliminating it right on top of that Torrential Gearhulk. But really it's pointing at the Scrap Heap Scrounger. And now this 5/6 is going to swing in for the final point of damage. And that is going to lock it up. White-blue approach in the hands of Bertoncini. Going to be moving into the top 8. So, round 15 coming to an end. It's going to be the top 8. Up next, 8 players out of all of the ones that showed up for these 2 days. They are going to fight for seat number 1 for the finals right after this.